Hello everyone, thank you for joining me today. Today's video is going to be a look at how we avoid accountability around our own growth and development. How not to avoid it, maybe I should say. And you know, we are living in times where we are being asked to really be calm in the chaos, to be more confident in the uncertainty and the unknown. And as a result, this is really having us pivot quickly. It's having us expand our perspectives and our awareness and our consciousness. And so the opportunity to really start looking at our own accountability around our own growth and development is what's going to help us expand our perspective, shift our consciousness in how we behave and behaviors we want to change, but also in how we lead our teams, our companies, our businesses, our clients, those types of things, relationships, period. So we're going to talk a little bit about this. I'm going to share with you a perspective from a client that I worked with last week, actually. This was a woman who is a leader in a very large organization, and she was needing to collaborate with another team in the organization to get a project completed. And she came to the call really frustrated. She said, I have tried to communicate with this team. They're not team players. They don't communicate effectively. They're unprofessional. They don't value my expertise. They drop me off emails. And I'm just really frustrated, and I've been kind of avoiding them, managing around them. So we decided to unpack this and see if we could open up more expanded awareness in her around this relationship and shift her perspective, because it sounded like she was getting boxed in by her perspective. And so one of the things, the very first thing I asked her was, where do you go when you know you have to communicate with this team? Inside yourself. What thoughts start playing out inside yourself? And she said, I start doubting my expertise. I start doubting my confidence. I go into doubt, and I start not feeling confident, not feeling like I'm good at leading, that maybe I don't know what I'm doing. And she said, and I start feeling like this is unfair. I kind of have a pity party. I go into kind of being a victim in my head. I said, okay, how does that make you feel in your body? What red flags start showing up in your body? And she said, I come to think of it, she said, my chest starts tightening up. I almost feel like I'm getting squeezed at my heart. And she said, and what's interesting is I get this emotion that comes up, almost like I want to cry. I then asked her, what behavior, how would she like to be in this relationship? And she said, well, I would like to be confident. I would like to communicate clearly and calmly. I would like to not go into reaction. I would like to not avoid it, because I tend to be conflict avoidance. I don't like having conversations when there's conflict. I tend to avoid that. I said, okay. I said, what strategies would you have to do to start being in that place when you're communicating with this team? What she realized with this conversation was that where she goes is to loss of self-respect for herself. She goes into not feeling confident and not really letting her leadership competencies shine, her relationship skills shine. And she said, I really would have to take a stand for myself, not be afraid of having the conversation around this conflict. I would need to have that conversation face to face. We've been doing it in email. I would then take time to review what I have accomplished as a leader, and especially on this project. The things about myself that I am proud of, I would remind myself of that. And really going in and knowing I'm putting a stake in the ground for myself, for my own self-respect. In this conversation, she realized that this is really about strengthening her courage around what she avoids. She avoids conflict when conflict shows up with the team. Through this process and this conversation, she talked about how even her team members come into her office and complain about this team. And in the process, she tends to complain with them and empathize with them. And she recognized that her own avoidance of conflict with this team was impacting her team and how she leads them. So in her deciding to take these strategies to set the one-on-one up face-to-face, to really be confident and neutral when she goes into that conversation, and to recognize that she's being courageous with herself and she's putting a stake in the ground for her own self-respect and confidence. These were strategies that would help her be the best possible leader for herself and her team. So she did that. She did exactly those strategies she decided to do. She had a great conversation with the individual. They worked through the issues and they've come to completion. And she's now taking those strategies for when she has these conversations with her team. Because her role as a leader is to empower her team and not empathize with them, not complain with them. So I wanted to point out this example because maybe there's situations in your life or your leadership where you can begin to observe where you're avoiding certain behaviors that aren't the most productive. How are you pushing your edge around your own growth and development? The way to push the edge is to begin to notice what you're avoiding or where you're lashing out. There are two types of behavior we can be as humans, right? We can be resistant or responsive. And resistant behavior is when we either shut down, we disengage, or we lash out, we get angry. Responsive behavior is when we're calm, we're curious, we want to engage the other party, we're seeing them as a peer-to-peer, we're open, communicative. It's a whole different way of being. And all of us as humans fall in both of these categories. There are certain challenges, people, situations that put us in resistant behavior, and there are certain opportunities and challenges that put us in responsive behavior. The opportunity is to stop avoiding what you're resisting and to begin to allow that to work for you in moving you into responsive behavior. So I invite you out of this short video around avoiding accountability of shifting our behavior to notice where do you go into avoidance or anger around certain behavior, certain situations. And how can you begin to work with that that's triggering you in a way that expands your own perspective, your own awareness, your own consciousness as a leader. I hope this has been helpful. I want to invite you all to check out my new playbook. My book, Be Happy Now, came out in November, and I created a workbook out of the book called the Be Whole Journey Playbook. And it's a 12-month coaching course with this playbook added in how to integrate what I'm talking about in the book so that you actually change your way of being into more productivity, more curiosity, more engagement, more happiness in how you lead yourself, your life, your teams, your companies. Thanks for joining me. We'll be back with our next video series off of this and talking about how we hold our teams accountable. How do we begin to coach to their potential? I hope you'll join me. I look forward to seeing you there.